And we are live.
Hey,
No one's here yet.
broadcasting to nobody.
So we'll just wait. There we go. There's a
No,
complete.
there are
All right.
3,
Here they come.
6. Woo! Hello, everybody.
Welcome, welcome,
Those
welcome.
of you that are trickling in, hello, welcome.
We're just going to take a little bit of time to let people kind of trickle in. And then once we kind of have a solid amount, we'll get started with some introductions and rules. But
Yeah,
for now, welcome wherever you are.
yes, hi. Thanks for joining us from wherever you may be, from whatever day it is for you.
Yeah,
I think it's Tuesday for me.
sounds right.
Could be Sunday, I don't know. There's Golden.
Hey.
Hello. Welcome.
Did it. That took a little bit of doing.
Yeah.
Whole team's here.
This technology stuff, sometimes it's an uphill battle. Welcome again, everybody.
While we wait for a few more people to come on in, we can just do a couple introductions. Hello, Grendel. I see you raised your hand. Hi. My name's Jacob. I'm the training coordinator at QSC. I'm just going to be moderating this, so you won't hear a ton from me, but you will hear a ton from Jason.
I'm gonna
face off.
talk your ear off for the next hour. It's gonna be nuts. So much to say.
So get used to him. No, he's great. It's going to be an awesome webinar. He's got a lot of great information for you guys. Eric and Golden are going to help him answer a lot of the questions that you guys may have for him. So go ahead and say hi, guys.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Cool.
If you guys do have questions, I saw one of you already raised your hand. That is an option. However, if you do raise your hand, we want to make sure that you still throw your question in the Q&A. There is an option down at the bottom. You can do the Q&A and you can type any questions you have in there. You can leave your name or you can make it anonymous if you don't want us to know who you are. But we will do our best to answer all the questions that come through there. If we are not able to answer them in the time that we have, there's just a ton of questions. Don't worry, they'll get cataloged and we'll be able to answer them later. But yeah, make sure you throw your answers, your questions in there so that we know the best way to answer it for you. We're not going to have the chat open because that can get a little chaotic. So just stick with the Q&A. And then also, we just ask that you stay on topic with what is going on in the webinar and the information that we're going over today. Because if we get off topic, then it'll become a 3-hour webinar, and I got dinner. So
Got evening plans.
Yeah. But please stick to the topic at hand. And if you do have any kind of tech-related issues that are outside of the scope of what we're talking about, go ahead and contact our tech support team, which Jason has just put up the information there on the screen right now. So
That's right.
That would be the best way to get information on that subject.
Correct. Yeah, we're gonna be kind of going through some operational stuff and talking about a few application-based topics today. So yeah, tech support issues. We have actually a really super tech support team that you can direct all those questions to and get the appropriate help with that. So awesome. Cool. I think that takes care of the rules for you guys there. So yep, please don't be shy with your questions, and we'll go ahead and get going if we're all done. Cool. I'm going to switch back to that for a moment here and just kick us off. So this is Introduction to TouchMix. So this is going to be a basic overview of the TouchMix family of digital mixing consoles. We're going to talk about the hardware. We'll walk through basic navigation and then dive into the channel strip settings so you guys can get a feel of how to get around the mixer and where all the tools and things are. We're also going to take a look at a few unique features that are capable of simplifying complex processes and allow you to get just a really good sound really quickly and really easily no matter what your skill level might be. So, whether you're a novice or, a decades old pro, mixing an engineer, there are a lot of really cool tools on here that can kind of get you up and running very quickly and get you a really good sound really easily and quickly. So let's go ahead and just dive right on in. I'm going to start off talking about the hardware, and to do so, I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to show a couple of PowerPoint slides here just to kick us off. Here we go. So TouchMix in general is a series of compact digital mixing consoles. They were designed kind of with three key aspects in mind. We wanted them to be compact but powerful. So it's a full-featured digital mixer in an ultra compact and kind of tight form factor. The 8 and the 16 are about the size of laptops. You could just actually stick them in a backpack and travel around with them. So they're really lightweight and really portable. We wanted them to be geared towards a very wide range of applications. We wanted them to be very versatile. So these are excellent for anything from production professionals, rental production houses, musicians, bands, live performance venues, nightclubs, houses of worship. You could even use them in a recording environment or podcast environments, or if you're doing some broadcast or web broadcast environments and things like that. So they're incredibly versatile, really wide range of applications that they can be used within. But then the key element that we wanted to focus on with the TouchMix here was results. We wanted them to deliver results, and we wanted that to be an easy thing. We wanted you to be able to achieve a really good mix and a really good sound really easily. So it was the approach that we took with the design and all the functions that we put into these mixers. And we're going to kind of cover most of those bases today. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my next slide here. So starting from the outside in, I'm going to talk about the hardware. I'm going to show a couple more slides here just talking about the preamps and the connectors and things like that, and then we'll jump to my camera view and we'll talk about the mixer from there, and you'll be able to see firsthand how this works. So the first thing I want to tell you about are the preamps. All three models have very high quality Class A preamps that are very low noise. So right from the get-go, we're kind of setting you up to get a good sound. As soon as the signal hits the mixer, it's hitting a really high-quality preamp, and it's delivering really nice sound into the mixer. We'll touch a little bit more about this in a little bit, but the preamps are also analog. It is the only part of the mixer that is analog. Once it passes through the preamp, then it hits our DA converters or AD converters, and everything is digital from there. And of course, on the TouchMix 30, you've got 24 preamps. On the 8 and 16, you have 8 and 16 respectively, with a few additional quarter-inch stereo inputs as well. And I'll talk about those in a second as well. We also have a number of outputs on all three mixers, all of which include a full suite of output processing, including a third octave graphic EQ, plus a 6-band parametric EQ. So there are 2 EQs on each and every output. You have limiters, you have time delay, and you have, on the TouchMix 30, you have 12-band notch filters. That is for our anti-feedback system, which we're going to be taking a look at a little bit later in the lesson. So you have all that processing on every single output, the mains, and all of the auxes. Then on the TouchMix 30 Pro, you have 14 mono auxes that all have that same processing on each and every single one. You also have the addition of 2 stereo auxes. So there are an additional 2 quarter-inch stereo outputs that you can utilize as well on the TouchMix 30 here. Now on the TouchMix 8 and the TouchMix 16, again, we have the same processing on all of the outputs on all three mixers. The difference is the number of connections that you have. So on the TouchMix 16, we've got 6 mono aux outputs plus 2 stereo quarter-inch outputs. And on the 8, we have 4 mono outputs plus a single quarter-inch stereo output. That one is actually paralleled to auxes 3 and 4. So if you were to go into aux 3 and 4 and link them together to create a stereo pair, then you could utilize that quarter-inch output and get your stereo output that way. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Cool. And so I think that covers it there. Yep. Let's go ahead and take a look at the mixer. Live and in person. Here we go. So here's my mixer. This is what I'm going to be using for the remainder of the lesson today. I am going to be using a TouchMix 30 Pro. And you know, when it arises, I will kind of touch on a few features that are unique to the TouchMix 30 Pro. But for the most part, everything that I'm going to show you is actually available on all three mixers, and for the most part, looks identical. So the navigation scheme and the layout of the screen and the buttons and things like that are all matched on all three models. So it's a pretty nice full-featured family that we have here. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. I'm going to back up for just a second because I do want to talk about a few of the physical controls. One in particular is our physical knob. So our main control surface is, of course, the touchscreen. On the TouchMix 30 Pro here, it is a 10-inch multi-touch capacitive screen, so you can select up to 4 touch points simultaneously. Here we go. I've got 3. I'm hitting my mute. On the TouchMix 8 and 16, it is a slightly smaller 7-inch screen, and that screen is a single touch capacitive screen, so you do not have the multi-touch capabilities on the N16. And that is just a difference in the hardware itself. However, you have the ability to pair an iPad or a tablet, an Android tablet, with the mixers over Wi-Fi and mix remotely, or have an additional screen handy if you want to mix with dual screens or multiple screens. And the iPad, certainly has multi-touch capabilities on their screen, and most Androids do as well. So if you are pairing a tablet device, you can take advantage of multi-touch through the device. And we have the encoder wheel here. So these are sort of the primary control functions. Most controls are going to be accessed through the screen, and you're going to be navigating the screen through getting around and working your mix. But the wheel here is a really nice feature that kind of complements the screen. And what you can do is you can, with your left hand, select a fader or a parameter on the screen, and then use your right hand on the wheel to adjust its value. And so I can kind of take this two-handed approach to the mixer and get a really nice, smooth workflow happening, with the wheel and the touchscreen. So I can kind of get around really quickly. I can make adjustments very fast, and with the wheel, you can actually you can get really, really fine control. Every click, as you turn the wheel, you will feel that it is detented. So you're kind of clicking it up if you go slowly. Every click or every detent represents 1 dB of change. So if I'm going up, each clicking, you can kind of see. I'll go a little bit closer at this point, so you've seen my wheel. You can actually see how I'm adjusting this channel, in single dB increments. If I press the wheel down, if I hold it down while I turn it, now I get what's called fine control, and it actually adjusts in half dB increments. So realistically, with the wheel control at your disposal, you could actually get more granular and more fine control than you would have with a physical fader, because you're still relying on your finger to kind of nudge that up and down and try to make accurate adjustments. So with the wheel, you got an incredible amount of accuracy that you can use. So that is our recommended touch and turn mixing technique there. You've seen my faders on the screen clearly. So what we display at any given time in our main mix view is 8 faders at a time. So you have 8 input channels here, plus your main output here. And the output fader always lives here, and that pertains to whatever mix you're currently looking at. So now I'm in my main mix, and we can see that up here where it says main mix. So I'm looking at my main mix faders, and I've got my main output fader that always lives here. Up above the top here, up above on the top of the screen, I have my different navigation options here, which on the main mix screen are going to show me my different banks of faders. So we're presenting you with 8 channels at a time plus the output. On the 30 here, there are 24 inputs, plus some other banks of faders after that. So to get to my different banks, I can simply select the different banks in my navigation strip up at the top. So here's 9 through 16, here's 17 through 24, and then we have our stereo inputs. So there are 3 stereo inputs on the TouchMix 30 here, which are 1/4-inch connections in the back. Next to that, now I have my 2-track stereo recording channels here. After that, I've got my effects master channels. So we do have effects built into the board we'll talk a little bit about. I can also access my aux output faders right within my main mix here. So if I need to adjust the level of any of my master aux outputs, I can do that within my main mix. And then I have subgroups on the TouchMix 30 Pro. This is one feature that is unique to, or not unique, but it is within TouchMix, exclusive to the TouchMix 30 Pro. And then we have DCA groups. I'm not going to talk about these things too much in this one. We actually have a separate webinar a little bit later on in the month where we're going to dive into channel groups in particular as an entire topic. So definitely come back for that one. But those are all of your different banks of faders that you have here. So I'm going to go back to my input 1 through 8. Now down the left side of the screen are all of my various aux mixes. So all of my outputs, so I have 14 outputs on my TouchMix 30 here. On the 8 and 16, you would have 6 and 4 respectively. And so those would all show up here. And these buttons, like the master output here, don't ever go away. So no matter what screen you're on, kind of the screen is going to be bookended by your output fader and your navigation for your various aux mixes. And so if I just touch any of these, I can very quickly access any mix for any of my auxes here. And so not only can I access, I have that there at all times so I can access those mixes whenever I need to. We've also given you a nice visual indicator that you're looking at an aux mix instead of the main mix. If you'll notice, when I'm in the main mix here, these are white faders. And as soon as I go into one of my aux mixes here, now my faders are dark gray and they have a color bar in the middle of the fader. So that is, just a really, really quick visual indicator. Hey, you're looking at an aux. And then of course the color bar does correlate to the color that is assigned to the aux mix itself down the side there. So you can see each one of my different aux mixes is represented by a different colored bar. So you can kind of get a nice kind of cue to where you are and what you're looking at and what mix you're adjusting at any given time. And I will go ahead and say this, the colors are not adjustable. You can't change the colors or customize them. They are kind of just set. And it's just a tool to give you an indication that you're looking at an aux mix, and then you can correlate the colors to the specific mix if you need to do that. Cool, so that takes care of our main navigations. It's pretty simple, really. It's laid out very linearly. So we got our different fader banks up here. So as I'm mixing my different levels for all of my channels here, I can navigate that way, and it all happens very quickly. I can dive into any of my auxes, make adjustments very quickly, and then I've always got my master output over here. And you'll notice if I do go into an aux, that aux output becomes the master output fader for that aux mix. So it does correlate to the specific mix you're working in. Okay, back in my main mix. Now, let's go ahead and dive into a channel strip, shall we? Sounds good to me. Let's, actually, a couple other things while we're still looking at this screen. On the channels themselves, there are, aside from the fader, there are a couple of other controls here. We have a mute button, so I can engage mute buttons for all of my inputs and my output. I also have, on the inputs here, I have a pan control. So if I select that bar right in there and I use my wheel, I can adjust the pan so I can slide that channel either to the right or to the left within the stereo field. And then above that, I have a button called Q. And the Q system is essentially a monitor system. So you can plug a pair of headphones or a pair of low profile or small profile desk monitors into the Q output or the monitor outputs on the mixers, and then you can cue channels with this button and will deliver that channel to that output. So you can kind of monitor what's happening on that channel. You can monitor channels individually, or you can cue multiple channels at once, and you can even cue entire output. So if I wanted to listen to what's happening on my main output through a pair of headphones behind the desk here, I can just cue that channel and I listen to that. Okay, now to access all of my channel settings, it's very simple. I'm going to open the channel by pressing the name of the fader, and this is my default scene, so my channels don't have names yet, but they all will be defaulted to in1, in2, in3, so on and so forth. So if you touch that gray area with the name of the channel, it will open up your channel strip settings. And now we have all of our channel strip options here. So you can see I've got my EQ, I've got compression, I've got a gate, I even have an effects tab where I can route effects to the channel. I've got an auxes tab, a presets tab, and a setup tab, as well as this overview tab, which is what we're looking at right now, which is where we'll start. Kind of start with tab number 1 here. So the overview. The overview screen is actually a really, really useful screen to have. It's essentially what it sounds like. It gives you a single screen that shows you exactly how the channel is configured. When we have our EQ curve right here, We have our gate and our compressor GU meters, as well as our various controls. So we have threshold, attack, release ratio, and gain here. And if I touch any of these parameters, I can actually use the wheel to make adjustments to them. So all of the parameters on this screen are active. So you could come in here and it's sort of all of your show critical controls on a single screen. So you can take a look at how the channel is configured completely, and then if you need to make adjustments, you can do so right from this screen. Toggling my gate and compressor on and off, I can actually select my filters in my EQ, and I can make adjustments in there. And I can make changes to any of the auxes that it might be delivered to. I can send it out to auxes, and I can send it out to my effects all from this screen as well. Up at the top here, we have this little bar, which has a couple of really neat things as well. Starting over here, we have this preset field, and we're going to talk about the presets momentarily, but if you do have a preset recalled on the channel, the name of the preset will show up here. So you can, again, just on this one screen, you can see, okay, I've got my kick whatever preset recalled here. Here's my EQ curve. Here's what my gate and compressor are doing here on my effects. Next to that, I have this control called digital gain. Okay, and this can be an important control, and it's at least very valuable to be aware of. So the digital gain is found here as well as on the setup screen, and we'll take a look at that. But this is an additional gain stage after your analog preamp. I did mention the preamps are analog, and those are controlled with the trim knobs, which I don't know if I can back the camera up enough to get them in the view here, but if you're looking at a mixer yourself, you can clearly see that the knobs for all your preamps at the top. So the knobs themselves for the analog preamps are also analog, and because of that, they're also not motorized, so they're not scene recallable. So you can't save your gain settings for your analog preamps within a scene or within a channel setting or anything like that. The digital gain, however, is recallable, and it gives you plus or minus 15 dB of additional gain control after the preamp, after the analog preamp. So, to use it more on a basic level, if you had a particularly low-leveled signal into one of your inputs and you have the analog trim all the way up and you can't go any further and you still don't feel like you're getting enough signal out of that channel, you could go ahead and apply some of the digital gain to compensate and make up for that and get the signal where it needs to go. But additionally, if you leverage the two together, if you kind of use the analog and the digital gain kind of in combination with each other, then you can come up with some really cool scenarios where you can really easily save gain settings in a scene, and you can also control your gain from an iPad if you're mixing remotely, if you are doing that. If you're not physically next to the board because you're using an iPad and you're roaming around and mixing throughout the venue, having access to that digital gain can be really advantageous for that purpose. And what you'd want to do to take advantage of that workflow is set all of your analog trims to a nominal setting. So every single one gets the same setting, and it could be like straight up and down, noon, 12 o'clock, or maybe 1 o'clock, something like that. Just somewhere kind of in a median area that's just a general introductory signal to get the preamp going. And then from there, you adjust it with the digital gain. So if, for any particular channel, if setting the analog trim to noon isn't enough signal, you can come in here and you can make up for that with the digital gain. On the other hand, if it's a little too hot, the signal's a little too hot at noon, you could come in here and you could pull it down a little bit. I do want to warn you though, the digital gain cannot compensate for clipping. If you're clipping your analog preamp, the digital gain is not going to save you from that. So you do have to make sure that you're not clipping. So as long as no channels are clipping, with all trims set to noon or 1 o'clock, whatever your preference is, then you're good to go. If you do find that one or a couple of your channels are clipping, then you will have to obviously adjust the analog trim down a little bit farther to get that clipping to go away. And then you can take over with your digital gain from that point. And then if you save a scene, all of those digital settings are stored. If you're out, on an iPad mixing remotely, you have access to that on the iPad, and you can make those adjustments, and you don't have to worry about what your analog trims are doing because you just set them all the same and walk away from them, and we're primarily working with the digital gain from that point. Okay, there's digital gain. Next over, we have delay. So both the inputs and the outputs on the mixer here have up to 100 milliseconds of time delay. And this is a little bit different from a delay effect, which is sort of like an echo effect that you would apply to sweeten a sound or kind of add a cool texture to a sound. This is a more of a functional tool. It's essentially used if you need to delay either an incoming signal or an outgoing signal. Now, output delay is very commonly used if you're creating what's known as delayed fills, and that is if you're out in a large area or very commonly a large outdoor area, and the main PA at the stage just isn't quite hitting the people that are way, way in the back. You set up some auxiliary speakers back there, for those people, but you need to delay them to the time it takes the sound to reach them from the stage. Otherwise, you end up with a weird kind of echo effect of the sound that's coming from the actual stage, getting to those people, but the sound that's coming out of the speakers that are right next to them, getting to them at a different time. So you would apply a little delay to those speakers in the back that is matched, so all of the sound gets back there at once and everything sounds clean and clear. Input delay is just the inverse of that. We're delaying an input signal instead. Cool, so there's that's there. We also have the ability to reset the entire channel with that reset button there. That comes in handy. All right, so there's the overview screen. Let's go ahead and dive into the rest of the tabs in here and take a look at the complete channel processing suite that we have. So next over we have the EQ. So every channel has a 4-band parametric EQ available, and I can, use my touch and turn technique here. I can grab any of my sliders here, any of the controls for my sliders, and I can adjust the frequency, I can adjust the gain of that filter, I can adjust the Q or bandwidth of the filter. And so EQ is basically what we're going to use to kind of sculpt and shape the sound of that channel. We're applying, filters and either boosting or cutting certain frequencies or certain ranges of frequencies to either eliminate kind of buzzing or hum or unpleasant tones within the signal, and we might boost certain sections to gain a little bit more presence, out of that signal based on what we're doing. So this is the tool we're gonna use to do that, kind of shape and sculpt the sound and build a mix. So mixing is not just changing levels on faders and things like that. It gets a little deeper. You're actually kind of using tools like this, like EQ, and we'll talk about compression in a minute here, to actually kind of give each component or each element in your mix kind of its own little sonic space that it lives within, and so it's not competing with anything else, and everything can be heard clearly and distinctly, and everything sounds nice and pleasant. So these are the tools that you have at your disposal to create your mix and get a good sound. So there's the EQ. There is our compressor. I'm going to punch that on here so I can easily turn my compressor on like that, and now I can see it kind of lit up and came to life. A compressor, very quickly, is used to control the dynamics of a signal. So every audio signal, you can actually kind of see that in the graph here. This is sort of a graphic representation of an audio signal. This graph in general is actually a pretty cool and a unique graph to show what a compressor does, and I'll explain a little bit more about the graph in a second, but just a broad basic overview of a compressor is that it's controlling the dynamics. So an audio signal has peaks and valleys, and that happen is it's basically air changes in air pressure, if you want to get real scientific about it. And so if you were to look at a signal on a spectrograph, you would see, and if you've ever seen that, I'm sure you're familiar with what I'm talking about. You got your bouncing, wiggly signal there. A compressor will squish the distance between the peaks and the valleys of that signal. It will bring those closer together, so you have less of a dynamic range in that signal, and it's a lot easier to control the overall dynamics of that channel. A vocal channel is a really good example of why and when you'd use a compressor, or how a compressor might be applied. A vocalist or a voice can have a very wide dynamic range. It can get really loud and it can get really, really soft, and it can do so within an instant, realistically. So a singer can be belting it out and they can just get real quiet, within a moment. And that can get challenging to try and kind of be on top of that level, with just a fader, if we're just trying to deal with it like this. So often a compressor is applied, and it just kind of squishes that dynamic range a little bit. So when they're at their highest highs and at the lowest lows, there's less of a difference in volume between those two levels, and then we can let the fader sit a little more smoothly in the mix, and we can make smaller changes to that if we need to make changes at all. So that's what a compressor does. The graph here is pretty neat. It actually shows us linearly what the compressor is doing, and there are a number of other graphs you'll find when you work with compressors, either analog compressors or other plug-in digital compressors, things like that. And they'll have some sort of graph to kind of give you an idea of what the compressor is doing, but the one thing that most of them don't have is the time constant. So here we're showing you what the compressor does over time. So initially, it's going to compress our audio signal down, and then at some point it will release it back to its predetermined level. And that level is determined here with the threshold. You can see as I adjust that knob, that top bar of the graphic moves up and down. So that's setting our threshold, which is basically saying this is the point, this is the level that we want our compressor to click on. We're compressing everything above this threshold, and it is represented in dB. So right now I've got this set at negative 24 dB, so that means as soon as the channel level hits negative 24 dB, now anything over that is going to start to be compressed. My attack and my release time are used to really kind of fine-tune how the compressor compresses the signal over time. The attack is, you can see as I move that kind of slides out or in. That is how fast we're compressing our signal once it hits the threshold, and then the release is the opposite. So once the signal subsides back below our threshold level, how fast does the compressor release it back, to its normal non-compressed level? And then the ratio on the other side is telling us, it is expressed as a ratio because it's telling us how much compression is being applied to the signal. And this can get a little hard to get your head around sometimes. I know it was for me when I was first learning how to use this. So I'll do my best to try to convey this parameter here. But basically, it's expressed as various ratios, and you can see if I pick a 2-to-1 ratio there, that means for every dB that my signal breaches my threshold, it is going to be compressed by 2 dB. So at a 2-to-1 ratio, my threshold is 24. If it reaches 25, it is going to get compressed by 2 dB back down below my threshold. That is generally kind of what that parameter does, and hopefully it helps you kind of understand what these various key components of this tool can do and how to operate it here. Not gonna lie, it is one of the more complex tools on a mixing console to kind of get used to, but it is very handy and very, very commonly used on many things within a mix. Cool. That's our compressor. Let's go ahead and take a look at the gate. The gate, really quickly, is often used just to kind of clean up a channel. So it's sort of, the name sort of implies what it does. Imagine actually a physical gate, kind of on your channel that you set with a threshold similar to our compressors. We've got a threshold parameter here, but sort of opposite of what the compressor is doing. Until the signal hits that threshold, it's actually going to keep the channel closed, and it's not going to allow any audio to pass over that channel. As soon as the signal level rises above wherever we've set that threshold, now the gate opens and it will allow signal to pass through that channel until it recedes back down below our threshold again. Then the gate closes it. We have time constants here to sort of kind of smooth out that process, because you do want it to sound natural. If you have too quick of an attack and too quick of a release, it'll sound really unnatural and mechanical to have just that kind of like popping open and closed, over time as the signal goes up and down below and above the threshold there. So you do want that to be kind of a smooth thing that happens, and your attack and your release help you do that. And then your attenuation dictates how much attenuation is applied to the channel when the signal is sitting below that threshold level. So it's going to keep it at a constant attenuation that is set here until the signal breaches that threshold, and then it'll just allow it to be its level, whatever that level is above that threshold there. Cool. Hope that was easy to follow. So there you go. So there are our main three kind of mixing components. These are our EQ and what's known as the dynamics section, which is the compressor and the gate. Afterwards, we have effects. We do have a total of 6 different effects on the mixer, and I'm not going to get too much into detail here because we are actually going to have a whole nother webinar again I think next week where we're just going to talk about effects. We're going to really dive in and dig into the effects really deep. So for now, I'm just going to tell you that we have the effects, and they sound really good. They sound really nice, and you can operate them very simply within this screen. If I want to apply any of these effects to this channel, I can just grab any of these sliders and adjust their level with my wheel, or if you want to mix on the glass, you do have that option as well. You can slide them in and out like that, and that will deliver this channel out to that effects processor and then return it to the main output instantly. And there you go. So there is the main meat of our channel processing here. And with that, with all of our navigation that we've seen, and then accessing the channel levels, and then getting into our overview screen, EQ, compression, gate, and effects, from here, and if you knew what you're doing, if you're familiar with these tools at all, or at least semi-comfortable with them, I could probably turn you loose, and you would have a good idea on how to get going. You could start to actually build yourself a mix, which is pretty cool. Not that deep, not that dense of a navigation scheme here. Everything's laid out pretty linearly, and you don't have to go diving through a lot of menus to get to these key parameters here. However, if, let's say, you are maybe short for time, or if you have less experience or maybe no experience mixing, maybe this is the first time you've ever seen a mixing console, there are a couple of really, really cool tools on here that will help you to get these things configured very quickly and get you up and running and get you a good sound. The first of those that I'm going to cover are the presets. So I'm going to go over here to this presets tab, and we're going to take a look at the presets very quickly. So just to give you a rough outline of the presets on here, we have over 120 presets on all three mixers. There are a few additional presets that we added within the latest firmware release to the 30, and those are going to be made available for the 8 and the 16 any day now, I believe. But yeah, so in total, we have about 146 presets. So these things are fantastic. They were created in live environments using real musicians playing through active monitors and varied sized PA systems in different sized rooms. It was a long and very painstaking process of fine tuning the sound of an instrument through one PA, moving that instrument with an artist to another PA of a different size, tuning it in and dialing it in for that, and then moving it back to the original one and kind of Aing and Bing the sound there, fine tune it a little bit, move it to a third one, and then move them to a different room. And it just, we really, really took a lot of time and got really, really detailed with the process of creating these presets so that we could deliver something that was very, very usable and very, very applicable in a real world mixing situation. So what we have here are a different, the presets are laid out in different banks, with the first of which here, we have it laid out by instrument or voice. So if you're applying processing to any type of instrument, we've got that kind of categorized for you over here in the far left menu. You can see I've got bass, drums, frets, keyboards, percussion strings, vocals and speech, and then wind, brass, and harmonica down there. If I select vocals and speech, for instance, in the middle column here, I've got the type. So what type of vocalist channel am I trying to set up? Is it just, a general starting point, and it says any vocalist here, or maybe I already know that this is a musical application, and then I've got a couple of presets for, female and male vocalists, or maybe this is a speech application. If I select that, you can see I've got a number of presets that are categorized by different microphone types. I've got handheld, head, mic, lavalier, and podium. This actually, the lavalier preset I'm actually using right now. I've got it, I'm wearing a lav, which is what you're listening to me through, and I've got that preset recalled on my broadcast TouchMix 16 that's over next to me over here. So they work very well, and actually, just to show you this, I'll recall this one first and then dive into maybe another one. To recall a preset, you select it here. After you've gone through your menu, you've made your selection based on what channel you're setting up. You select it there and simply hit this recall button, confirm it, and then if you go take a look at the different channel settings, now we have an EQ curve. Look at that. This is why I like to show this one. That's an intense EQ curve. So this is what we came up with for our lavalier setting, and believe it or not, it works very, very well. But if you take a look at this for a second, this really can illustrate the power of the presets. This is, even if maybe you have some experience mixing, this curve in particular might not be something that you would have come up with on your own. So we took we took a long time to really fine tune and figure out what worked for different instrument types and different microphones and things like that. And basically what we've given you here is something that is going to get you about 80% of the way there. So these are going to configure your channel strip, and it might sound awesome. It might be perfect for whatever you're using it for, but it won't ever be less than 80%. So that is a giant head start if you're mixing engine or veteran. It is also a huge, well, time saver, same thing, head start. But if you are more of a novice, it's going to get you going. It's going to get you a good sound on that channel, and you can continue to use your presets to build out your entire mix. And we're actually going to talk a lot more about that on Friday. So if you want to come back for that one, we're going to dive much deeper into the presets here. But that's kind of a high level idea of what the presets do and how to set them up and how to recall them. A little bit of history on them as well. So after that, let's say, let's say we're after recalling a preset, we're kind of more in the 80% range. Maybe it sounds good, but we're not quite there. We still want to tweak it a little bit. From there, obviously, you can come over and make any adjustments that you want and use the preset just as a starting point, just to kind of get yourself going. You don't have to hunt down and find your preliminary EQ points and things like that. And then, if you find something on your own that you like, you do have the ability to save it as a custom preset as well. So you can save any number of custom presets that you might want. But let's say, you come back over here and the preset works great, but you do want to kind of make some adjustments, but you still aren't as experienced with maybe an EQ or a compressor, and you don't have the confidence that you'd like maybe with these tools. There is another really cool feature that really can help you kind of get into these tools if you're a little bit less experienced with them. And again, even if you do have a lot of experience, they can just save you some time. And this feature is going to be the simple mode, which you can find on just about every feature and parameter on the mixer here. So that is simple mode. That's found right here. If I engage that, now look at my EQ. Whereas before, I have a variable NASA control station, a bunch of knobs to turn. If I hit simple mode, there is 4 knobs. It's a 4-band EQ. That's as simple as operating a car stereo. You should be able to do that. So that's a really nice option. On the compressor, it's even more impressive. So on your compressor, you've got all these dials and all these different sliders and faders. If I hit simple, I get 1 knob. Do I want more compression or less compression? See, that doesn't get more simple than that. So what we're doing with simple mode essentially is condensing and reducing the number of controls that are presented to the user at any given time. So yeah, these are great. I like to call it like a gateway feature. So it can kind of help you to get comfortable using some of these tools if you're not as experienced. So kind of use it in simple mode first and get an idea of what it does and how it affects the sound. And then eventually when you're more comfortable, you can kind of release it out of its simple mode and start to really kind of play with some of these fine parameters like that. So there you go. So the presets in the simple mode alone are some key tools that we've put on here that can really just make your life easier as a mix engineer, no matter what your skill set is. Cool. Let's see here. We're getting towards the back half here. We're in the back half here. So I'm going to start talking about the output processing. I'm going to show you some really cool stuff in there. Real quick, before I jump in there, I am just going to touch on this setup screen here really fast. So in every channel, you do have a setup screen. And on the screen, you can do a number of things. Probably the most important, I wouldn't say the most important, but probably the most common reason to come into the screen would be to give the channel a name. I have a name field right there, and you can see because I recalled my preset on this channel, it has given me a name already. But if I want to customize this name, I can just press, I'll show you again. If I press into that field there, it gives me my keyboard. I can clear that out and I can name it whatever I want to name it, Jason Love. There you go. The other thing I can do is I can link channels here with this link button. So if I press that, I confirm that link. And now if I go home, that's the other part of the navigation that we haven't got to yet. To exit out of a channel to get back to your main mix screen, at any point you hit the home button, which is actually hidden by my face. Here, I'll give you a non-face view for a second. There we are. Okay, so this right here, that's the home button. If I press that, now that gets me back out to my faders. That's my mix screen. So in a channel by touching the fader, back out to my faders by pressing the home button. and that kind of rounds out the navigation paradigm there. So getting back into this screen, if I link two channels together, you can see now they both have the chain link icon right in there, and now their faders will move in unison. Those two channels are now linked. So any processing I apply to one will automatically be mirrored in the other, and of course the faders are now linked together, so those rise and fall together. The faders on the mixer will link in obvious pairs only. So 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, so on and so forth. So for instance, you couldn't link 2 and 3 or 4 and 5, things like that. So it is just sort of that obvious paradigm for your channel linking. But beyond that, it's a really, really useful feature. And then the other things you can do on here, we do have our digital gain control and our input delay on this screen as well. I can engage phantom power, I can reverse my polarity, and I can assign this channel to any of my channel groups from here if I need to. I can also remove the channel from my main left and right output if I have a need to do that. So a number of things can be done with the setup screen. It's very, very nice to be able to have an idea of what this screen can do. Cool. Now let's go ahead and get into our output processing here. So if I do the same thing with my output fader there, my main fader, I touch the word main. That gets me into my output processing. And now here we have an overview screen, very similar to our input screen here. I also have my parametric EQ plus my graphic EQ. So there are two EQs, two different types of EQs on here, a parametric and a graphic EQ. The graphic EQ is a 28-band graphic EQ, so got some really, really nice control with these two features. I also have a limiter, which is basically a compressor that is preset with a very high ratio, and so it actually starts to create a limit line for your signal level. By applying a very high amount of compression, you're actually creating a hard line at which your signal will not ever succeed or get higher than. Words are escaping me right now. But yeah, so you can actually, as the name implies, set a limit for your output level. And this is often found on outputs because it's used to maybe set up protection for speakers and amplifiers that are down the line that are connected to it and things like that. So we've got that available to us. We have presets here. We give you the ability to save any presets that you like. If you set up an output and you really like that, the way you dialed it in, you can save that and recall it at any point. We also have all of the processing that you would find in any of our portable PA speakers. So our CP, our K.2, and our legacy K, as well as our KLA and our KW loudspeakers. And we also have settings for E-Series. So if you're using E-Series with amplifiers, you can recall any of the E-Series settings here. And essentially what these are voicings to kind of just give some special sauce to those speakers and really make them perform to the best of their ability with the mixer here. I also have my setup screen, which can do a number of things. Here is my output delay. So if I need to set up those delay fill speakers that I talked about, you come in here and you set that here. The time delay is represented in feet, milliseconds, and meters. So that's a really nice way to be able to gauge your distance and figure out how much delay you need to apply. Another really cool thing we can do here is along with all of the voicing presets for speakers, if you are using QSC loudspeakers with your TouchMix, which you should, we have setup guides as well. So if I take, for instance, K.2, this screen will not only allow me to recall any of those voicing presets here, I can do that from here as well. It also gives me this really nice diagram which will actually show me exactly where to set the gain for that loudspeaker and gives me a little advice on how to kind of configure the back of it. If you're familiar with the K.2 speaker, it's got the little LCD screen and control paradigm behind it. So this is telling me if I'm using, let's say, let's pick the K12.2. It's telling me, okay, recall the default preset on that speaker and then rotate the speaker gain 2 clicks past 0. So there you go. So it tells you exactly how to configure the loudspeaker so that it will perform optimally with the mixer. So just another really cool kind of feature that'll help you get things set up really quickly, and you can know that it's going to perform well and be confident with the performance of your entire PA. Okay, let me catch my breath for a second. Now, let's talk about something really fun. The anti-feedback system. I kind of skipped over that one intentionally when I went through my processing here, but I'm going to go ahead and dive into this now. The anti-feedback system is one of the tools on here that are going to take a complex process and really simplify it and automate it almost. Not almost, there is an automated mode here, which I'm going to show you. This is going to get crazy. So the anti-feedback system essentially is a tool that is used to eliminate and mitigate feedback at the start of a performance and during a performance. So there's kind of two modes that this can be operated within. The wizard mode, which is the automated mode, is used to ring out a room. And just real quick to give you a little background on ringing out a room. Typically, you'd ring out a room by setting up your PA. You set up all of your equipment, and then you start to get some preliminary fader levels, kind of like turn things up to about where you think you'd want to have them. And then you'd get some processing happening on the channel. It doesn't have to be perfect, just based on whatever, is connected to each of your inputs, kind of just start to get a basic EQ curve going, and just so you have some base processing, before you start to get the main fader up, because if you just open up a whole bunch of microphones without any EQ or anything like that, the PA is going to feedback and take off really quickly. Presets are a really great way to apply your base processing and then maybe fine tune from there. So let's say you've done that, you've dialed in a bunch of presets and you're ready to ring out the room. What you typically do from that point is, with all your faders kind of all about where you're going to have them, then you grab the main output and you start to slowly turn that up, and you get it. You start to go for where you think you want to have that, and at anywhere along the way before you get to that point, if the system starts to feed back, you got to come in and eliminate those frequencies that are feeding back with an EQ. You typically come into your main output graphic EQ there, and you'd start to kind of like play with your filters until you find the frequency that's feeding back, and then you can use that filter to get rid of that frequency and pull it out. Or maybe you have an RTA handy so you can actually see the feedback spiking on the RTAs, and you can know, and you can come in here and be like, okay, I know it's this frequency, I'm going to cut that out. And you'd repeat that step as many times as you needed to until you had enough level on your main output without the system feeding back. So it's basically stabilizing the PA against feedback. This tool does this for you, does that whole process automatically. And so from this screen, if I were to hit the feedback wizard button there, it takes me to this screen here, which is my wizard mode. And now, for the fun, I have a microphone connected to channel 1 of this mixer. You can see my level there if I start talking into this. I've got my master output fader all the way down. I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to unlink these for now. I'm going to show you this in real time. All right, I don't need you. I don't need you. Okay, so I'm just going to take this into Unity. And yeah, that's fine. So I've got my level here. Now I'm going to place this microphone in a moment in front of my desktop monitors here, and I'm going to start to spin up my man output until just about the point where I start to hear it start to go. And then, yeah, then we're going to have some fun. Cool, so let's go ahead and get this going. I might need to mute my mic actually before I do this. So during the next minute while I'm demonstrating this, my voice might drop out. Fair warning. So let's see what happens if I just get this up a little bit. Desktop monitors engage. It's already going. Here we go. Got that there. It is placed optimally. If I spin that up, where can we get it? A little more. All right, muting my mic. Actually, all I have to do is take it out of my feed so you guys can still hear me. All right, now I can get that up considerably, and here we go. And there we go. So there we go. Now we can hear it start to feedback. I'm going to back this off a little bit until we're not hearing that anymore. Okay, now let's go into anti-feedback wizard. And what's going to happen, I'm going to give it a little bit of pink noise just to speed up the process, so it's got something to listen to and latch onto. When I hit the start button, watch the fader. So the fader is going to automatically start to rise from this position that I left it at. And as soon as feedback occurs, it's going to eliminate it with its filters here. So start, watch the fader. Got my microphone right in the face of my speakers here. So ugly. There you go. So it's very reactionary. Going to lock on and then deploy the filter to notch that out almost instantly. Yeah. So good. All right, so I've got about 10 filters engaged there. Now, at any point, I can exit it, and then it will return my fader back to its starting position. And you can see where I had it at the point that I exited. It probably gave me 12 dB of headroom above my starting point, where I know the PA is going to still be stable. All right, let me kill my desktop monitors so it wouldn't cause any more problems. Very good. So there it is, anti-feedback. It's very reactionary, it works very quickly, and it stops and eliminates the feedback before it gets to a really obnoxious level. And of course here, this is not a practical or realistic application. Hopefully you would never put a microphone directly in front of a speaker. That is very bad. You're guaranteed to feedback, and no amount of feedback wizardry is going to fix that. So if you had a realistic scenario with microphones set up on stage, behind your PA speakers, but maybe in front of your monitors and things like that, you could use this tool to stabilize that PA system. And you do have this on every single output. So I showed it to you on my main outputs, but if you go into your auxes, I can go into my aux output processing, and I have a dedicated feedback wizard on every single output. So you can start with your main PA, and then you can ring out all of your stage monitors individually, and so the entire PA is just extraordinarily stable. Beyond that, let's say, during my ring out my room process, I let it apply the filters necessary. Typically, if you're ringing out a room, it'll use maybe 5 or 6. Between 4 and 6 is about where it'll usually end up being to get the PA to be stable. If it ends up taking much more than that, either you're doing what I'm doing, which is bad, or you might have your gain structure needs to be reevaluated. So you might have a gain problem. But if you've configured your gain structure appropriately, come back on Friday because we're going to talk about that too. You might use 5, 6 filters to start this process. Afterwards, on the TouchMix 30 here, with your 12 filters available to you, you've got an additional 6 or 7 filters. On the TouchMix 8 and 16, there are a total of 8 filters in this tool, still more than enough that you need to mitigate feedback to ring out your room and then mitigate it throughout the performance. And the way this works from this point, I'm going to do this one more time, but I'm going to use my manual kill mode. So after the wizard mode, you don't want to run the wizard during a performance. That's not going to work. But you have the manual kill button. So if there is still feedback, if feedback occurs at any point during the actual performance, you can come directly into the screen. It will lock on to the frequency that it's feeding back, and you can hit manual kill. And I'm going to demonstrate that right now. We're going to create a little more feedback today. I'm going to place my microphone right here, and I'm just going to ride this up. See where we can get it. Let's go. It's so stable. Doesn't want to. What? I'm going to max it out. Wow. Really stabilized the heck out of this. Okay, let me eliminate some filters here. Like, you know what? Let's just reset it, and I'll show you the manual kill. All right. So I'm going to let this go for a second. Come on now. Oh, you know what? I'm an idiot. I got to turn my desktop monitors back up. Haha. There we go. Now that should take off pretty easily. There it's going. All right, so it sees, now it sees that. Bam. Oh yeah. Bam. Killing feedback. I could do this all day. Captain America. So there you go. So this tool is extraordinarily helpful and very easy to use. So you can, with this tool at your disposal, you really, feedback is no longer an issue. So there you go. There is the feedback wizard, and that will sort of conclude my demonstration here. I know we're right at about time, but there's one last thing I did want to show you. Sorry, we're going a little bit over, but the other process here that we've sort of automated for you is room tuning. So all 3 mixers have a room tuning wizard, which can be found in the wizards. So if we hit the wizards button here, is a physical button in the button cluster above the wheel. We hit wizards, we get to this screen, and if we select, threw my focus off. If I select wizards or tuning wizard there, I get into this screen. And what this does is this is going to flatten the frequency response of my PA to the physical space. And so basically, there will be an acoustic difference in the true sound that is coming out of your PA, or the digital sound before it leaves the speakers. And as soon as it leaves the speakers and is in the real world and in your space, then it's going to be reflecting off of surfaces, and just the tone of the room is going to change that sound slightly. And so this tool actually will apply, it'll calculate what that difference is, and it will apply an EQ curve to your output to flatten that and eliminate that difference, to give you a really, really nice base to start mixing from. And I'm showing you this last here, but realistically, if you're going to use this tool, you'd probably want to use this first. The very first thing you do once you have all of your gear set up is run the wizard and tune the PA to the room. And again, it's incredibly easy to use. So coming into the wizard screen here, we're simply going to select which output we want to tune. So we have the main output and then any of our auxes. So we can run this again on any of our outputs individually. And then I hit the next button here. It takes me to this screen, and this is right before we hit liftoff and we launch it into operation. Here we get a nice diagram of where it wants me to place my measurement microphone. So we do recommend it. I'm not going to say it's guaranteed, but we do highly recommend that you use what's known as a measurement microphone to run this tool. And if you're unfamiliar with what a measurement microphone is, you could just do an internet search for a measurement microphone. But it'll be one of those microphones that comes to like a needle point. It comes to a very, very fine point at the end of it. They come in. There's many different manufacturers make them of varied price ranges. You could find one for about $100. All the way up to like $2,000, but you don't need the $2,000 one for this tool. So it is highly recommended to just get one of those, and then you're going to connect it to the talkback connection on the back of the mixer. So there is a dedicated talkback channel, microphone channel. You connect your measurement microphone there, and that is what the mixer listens to that microphone for when using this tool. After that, you simply hit begin, and it's going to take over. It's going to start playing pink noise out of the PA fairly loudly, so you do want to issue a warning or maybe clear the room before you run this. So it's going to play pink noise for about 20-25 seconds, and it's going to be listening with that microphone, and it's going to make a calculation. It has the digital signal inside the mixer, so it's listening to that. Now it is hearing what the room sounds like, playing that same signal, and it's going to calculate the difference and present you with an EQ curve that you can then apply to your master output and flatten the response of your PA to your room. So it is a highly complicated process that it is just doing automatically. If anybody is familiar with a smart tool or smart rig, SMAART, this is essentially doing what that does. But that uses a whole lot of math, and you need a bunch of computer software and stuff like that. So this is basically a slightly simplified version of that, but you get the same result. So this is a really, really incredible tool to have at your disposal, and it just really gives you, like I said, a great baseline to start mixing from. If you run this tool, if you apply use the presets and kind of dial in your mix that way, by the time you get to ringing out the room and using the feedback wizard, you probably are going to be fairly stable already, and might not really even need that. But so with those things alone, with the presets, in simple mode, and these two wizards that we've seen, the anti-feedback and the room tuning wizard, this thing is really, really just a mix engineer in a box. You're getting the brain of a professional mixing engineer in this tool at your disposal. And so if you know how to get to these different things, you know how to activate these processes, you can get up and you can get a great sound very easily and very quickly. And it doesn't matter what your skill level is. The mixer more or less is going to do a lot of this stuff for you. So it's pretty fantastic to be able to have all this at your disposal. And then with all that, with it doing it all for you, that's not to say that you couldn't use these tools to kind of teach yourself how to mix. Use the presets, study the EQ curves, study the compressor settings that they give you, and kind of listen to how they affect the sound, make some adjustments on your own, and pay attention to what it does to the sound, and you can really kind of get an education from this thing, as well as having the tool at your disposal. So there you go. There's TouchMix. That will conclude our introduction to the mixer here. At this point, you should be fairly confident at understanding what it does, confident, approaching it, understanding the navigation paradigm and how to get to the various processes and parameters here. So you should be able to get up and running. And with that'll kind of conclude my gargantuan spiel. And as I kind of mentioned throughout the lesson here, we are running subsequent webinars throughout the rest of the month where we're going to kind of dig in a little deeper on a lot of the things that I discussed here, and we're going to talk about some other things that I actually haven't even talked about at all. So if if you're available, please come back and join us for those. Even if you might not be available at that time, I highly recommend just registering for them. There's no limit on our registrations at this time, and if you register for it, even if you can't actually make the webinar, once the webinar concludes, we do send out an email follow-up afterwards with a link to the recording of that webinar, so you could still watch the recording of it after we go live with it. So just another way that you can kind of get this information out to yourselves. And all right, I'm going to go ahead and shut up now and take any questions. Are there any questions? It's pretty quiet so far.
I think we answered them all.
Great. Well, you guys are rock stars. Made my job fairly easy. All I had to do was talk for an hour. Cool. Well, good. Then if there are no questions, then I guess I will sign us off. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you got some out of this. I hope it was helpful for you. And check out our calendar. We've got webinars scheduled through the rest of the month of June, and we'll probably be adding more into July and things like that. I will say, if you've been participating in these at all so far, or if you've been looking at the calendar, we are sort of running in a cycle. We've got a number of webinars that we sort of run out in a circuit and then restart, which is right now we're kind of restarting our circuit. This month, I'm actually adding a brand new topic towards the end. We're going to take a deep dive into working with auxes and mixing with auxes, and we're going to explain the different pickoff points and things like that. So that one is a fresh topic that we're going to cover at the end of the month. So check it out. And
So Jason, we have one person who wants to know
cool.
if they should download what you suggest in the email.
Yes, if the email has a download link and instructions, you don't have to. It's just kind of an offering that we've given you to enhance your experience with the webinar. It's essentially some of the lessons. I run tracks on my mixer, and we actually get into some audio practices and things like that. And so to be able to use the same tracks that I'm using and follow along with me can be advantageous if you want to do that. So we offer those to you for those sessions that we do run the tracks. So if you have a mixer and you have the ability to download those files, I highly recommend doing that. And even if you don't follow along with me, it's kind of nice to have just some tracks to play with. You can just put on a drive and have a full multi-track mix to work with and use some of these tools and play with.
So are the downloads different for each session?
The only thing that is different are the scenes that I give you. All the tracks are all the same. So if you've downloaded the tracks already, I might add a second link that will just give you the scenes, because that would be a lot smaller of a download for you. But all of the tracks for all of them are all the same. We work with the same tracks, but I give you different starting scenes that just set up the mixer a few different ways based on what the lesson is. So that's the only difference. Good question.
And any more takers?
Anybody else? Cool.
Looking good.
All right. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
All righty.
Take care out there.
Bye-bye.